also a friend, and certainly a friend of mine as well, and that's Ted DiBiase. How come Ted never got the NWA World title? I know that was mooted at one point, and he came closer than Barry.
I don't know. I told you last time we talked about it, it was a vote. But I feel confident that if Ted had become the world champion, he would have been great. I wrestled DiBiase a lot of our Broadways too, but DiBiase is another guy that I don't think gets his due as a professional wrestler, because when they got to the WWE, the guys that were really good, polished, hard-working guys that could do anything didn't have to do it because the company didn't ask them to go out and go 20, 30 minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was a different time. It was a different time, and they weren't. They were more involved in the gimmick and selling merchandise than Ted proving to the world that he was the best wrestler. Because I'm sure for a period of time up there was nobody anywhere near as good as Ted as an in-ring performer.
Well, that's.
But he'll be remembered as the $1 Million Man.
Well, that brings me to my next point. When he went up there, he was one of the best wrestlers in the world. He had headlined around the country, but they totally changed his character, made him a gimmick performer. And I'm not criticizing because it worked. I mean, incredibly worked. But why would they do that? Why would they feel the need to take a proven commodity and totally overhaul it?
Merchandise.
Yeah, but they didn't sell merch for heels then, and Ted was a heel.
Oh, I'm sure the $1 Million Man things was sold. I think that was very popular. I don't know for a fact, but I mean, how can you possibly have Becky Lynch beat Charlotte? Merchandise.
Well,
that they don't own yet. It's ridiculous.
That's what I hear. Now, when you went to WWE,
when they own it, I'll let you know.
I know you will. Now, when you went to WWE as Nature Boy Ric Flair, did they consider changing you because you
No.
pretty much as is? Well, talk about those discussions because that might have surprised you to some degree. I'm thinking.
No, it didn't at all. I flew up there, and Vince. What you like about Vince is he tells you eye to eye, doesn't look at the floor, doesn't look at the ceiling, doesn't call somebody, talking to you one-on-one. And he goes to me, I can't guarantee any money, but I'll make you more than you made last year. He said, how much you make? And I told him. And he said, I'll make you more. I said, okay. So, but you know when you make a deal with a man, you can't go south on him because he's looking at you. And he said to me, look, everybody knows the story of Ric Flair. And if I have to hear that Ric Flair story, I'm not going to sit down at lunch with you guys ever again. He said, I don't want you to come up here and try to prove anything to anybody. You just be a regular guy. I'm going to put Earl Hebner with you. And I want you to make sure that he gave poor Earl Hebner the task of taking care of. Like Timmy White had to drive the Giant around. Earl Hebner had to drive me around. Isn't that a rib? You've been...
I've been on that duty in shorter spurts, yeah. It's certainly not for the faint of heart, is it?
Oh my God. Earl Hebner lives in Richmond, right? So did Dave. I took them both to a massage parlor one night in Richmond after the matches. They got home at 4 a.m. They said, and they said, Ric Flair had us driving back down to Greensboro.
Now, what kind of wrestler was Ted before he became the $1 Million Man? Because he was a real work rate kind of guy, wasn't he? Among the very best.
Oh, Ted DiBiase, absolutely. God, he was tutored by Dick Murdoch. I mean, he wrestled all those guys. I mean, I never met Ted's dad, but I mean, his father was a wrestler, and he was raised by the Funks. He was a big card in St. Louis, wrestling the top guys. I mean, that's a great picture of Ted right there. He could go, and I'll always think of Ted as being one of the top guys in the business.
Now, Ted did a different kind of promo prior to being the $1 Million Man too. He was very earnest. I'm I'm not criticizing because Ted did great promos as the $1 Million Man, but it indicates again how they totally changed his character.
Yeah, well, they're all about merchandise. And he was formulating, Vince was putting together something he thought would capture America, not just the wrestling fans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because America doesn't like somebody who's richer than them, and Ted certainly played that to the Hilton. And I think maybe this is underestimated, maybe I'm overestimating, but I thought that laugh was a big part of it. Ted's laugh was just
great.
incredible.
Yeah, the whole thing was great. It's like when I first got there, Pat Patterson said, "You should have been the $1 Million Man." I said, "I know." That was my gimmick.
Well, Ted actually stopped wrestling at 40 because of neck and back injuries, and he never really tried to come back, did he? Almost everybody tries to come back, even if they are hurt. Look at Shawn Michaels, but Ted never did.
He couldn't because of Lloyd's of London. When you claim Lloyd's of London, you got to pay him back if you come back to work.
Well, I think guys double-crossed that before, didn't they? Yeah, you had to pay him back something, but not all.
I know Henning had to pay it back. I can't think of anybody else that collected Lloyd's of London. Bossman didn't come back. I mean, I'm trying to think of guys. Geez, there were so many guys that claimed it. Rick Rude wasn't able to come back. There were a number of guys that wanted to come back, but after you claim it, you got to repay it, especially if you collect it on a tax-free. The way it was set up, if you wrote off the premiums, you got the payment tax-free. If you didn't write off the premiums, you had to pay taxes on it. So, dumbass me, I paid all the premiums for 5 years, didn't write them off, and then of course they went bankrupt and I didn't get a dime. But I got my health. So when I was going to go collect it, my head, I had that inner ear problem, and that was the day I was going to go get my check for $750, and then I had 2 more come in, $500 apiece, tax-free. I woke up, bingo, and I was fine. I hit my head against the wall about 4 times, and I called my dad up in Louisville, Kentucky. I said, "Dad, it's my head, the dizziness is gone because I had that inner ear problem." He said, "Well, I guess that I know that. I'm glad to hear that." He said, I'm going to get the money, Dad, for all this time off." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "You're not going to get that money, and you'll be, thank God you got your health. It's karma." So I never got it, but I got my health. And I'm here with you today to tell stories and have fun.
Is the $1 Million Man the best gimmick performer ever? It's got to be right up there with The Undertaker, right?
Well, I put Mark in a class of his own.
Me too, but it's close.
Yeah. Well, once again, I'm not taking away from Ted, but The Undertaker, 20 years, man. I mean, come on. Think about it. I just don't think you can compare anybody to Undertaker.
Now, Ted was a manager after he stopped wrestling, Nate, and he came to WCW.
No, do you understand what I'm saying? It's just, I think Taker just sits there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Longer, I mean, what was he, 22 years? I mean, it's crazy.
Now, Ted...
On top. 22 years on top.
Ted came to WCW and became the leader of the NWO, but very briefly. And I thought he should have been the leader, period, for the length of the NWO, because it made perfect sense. If it's the invading army from WWE, then have the rich guy from WWE at the head of it.
Yeah, but that wasn't going to happen. The NWO was not run by Ted.
Well, no, I know that, but I'm talking about in terms of the gimmick itself, being true to what the original intent of the NWO was.
Well, the original intent of the NWO, in my estimation, as I've said before, should have stayed Scott, Kevin, Waltman, and Kevin, Waltman. Yeah, the 3 of them.
Hogan, obviously.
And Hulk, and Hulk, of course. I would have never expanded on it. But there again, I had nothing to say about it. I just think that I believe if they had kept it the way it was, the WCW might still be in business. so many things went wrong. They're putting too many people in, and you know, once as proof that the four horsemen being a perfect example. Once you start to dilute a unit that is held in such high esteem as was the NWO, once you start to dilute that faction by adding people that nobody knows, it's kind of like, you know, I watch some of the shows and I'm paying strict attention now so that I can commentate on and talk to you intelligently about the shows. I don't know who some of the people are, and if I don't know them, I look up who they are and all that and their background. But I'm sure that the wrestling fans, it was confusing why every week there was 2 more people coming out the door from NWO black to, or black and white to NWO red. I was there, didn't understand it.
Well, yeah, me too. Now, Ted did a lot of his best work in the Mid-South promotion for
Yes.
Bill Watts.
Yeah, one of the greatest angles ever shot was he and DiBiase and I. With DiBiase and I, when Murdoch hit the ring, we put Ted in the hospital.
Yeah, double turn. It was a double turn. They turned Murdoch heel and Ted babyface.
Yep. It was unreal.
How great was the Mid-South territory, the UWF? Because
That was great. It was great.
What
But
made it great?
Bill was another guy that lived, like when he brought me as a champion. Oh God, he had some great talent there. I mean, the Freebirds, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express. You know, all those guys. I just recruited them when I met them. I called Crockett and said, "Guys, these guys got to come." You know, I think Bill was getting ready to sell anyway, but I mean, so much talent there. Jimmy Cornette and those guys. I mean, with Cornette and Midnight Express and Rock and Roll, they had a ride every night down there in Mid-South. And then you add JYD working with Ted DiBiase. Then they had Butch Reed, who was great. Terry Taylor was great. I mean, Steve Williams. I mean, they were just deep in talent. And Jake was there. Jake was great. They just had so much talent. So I went in there. But when I went in there, I wrestled an hour, or almost an hour every night with those guys. And that was Bill's finish with me. I never wrestled JYD down there, but I wrestled DiBiase for a couple hours. Terry Taylor, Hacksaw, I wrestled Hacksaw 3 1-hour draws. That's a long night.
Now, the Mid-South was one of the last territories, Rick, I think, where the people still suspended disbelief. I thought that got it a little more hot because Bill really adhered to kayfabe, didn't he?
Yes, insisted on it. But we did too at Crockett. The kayfabe thing was pretty strictly enforced everywhere, where a guy like Eddie Graham or Fritz Von Erich or Sam Mushnick or Harley and all that, I don't know. It went one day from being kayfabe, the next day just out of control. But it's safer for the guys now, and you wouldn't wish for anybody to be in some of the stuff. I've been a Blackjack Mulligan. I've been when they've had riots. Billy D got stabbed one night. Jack put me in the backbreaker, and Billy D, the Masked Superstar, hit the ring. We had 40 people in the ring. Billy D got stabbed. I told you about Ole being stabbed. I've seen guys, you know, they used to shoot whammo slingshots at us with pennies in them, you know, from 30 rows up. So I mean, I've seen some stuff that it would not be acceptable, and the guys, I certainly wouldn't want my daughter to go through or anybody to go through now. The fans used to be crazy, especially in the South. In Asheville, Carolina, a guy ran down to the ring of the gunny sack and threw probably a 6 to 8 foot long rattlesnake in the ring.
Huh.
Yeah, you can the whole ringside cleared. Never hurt anybody, but that's how crazy the fans were. The gunny sack going into the ring, and we saw him coming, right? I thought, what the hell's guy gonna do, right? He threw a damn rattlesnake in the ring.
Now, Nate, I want to talk just a quick note about the Ultimate Warrior, because I saw you said in an interview a while back that you had your worst matches with the Ultimate Warrior. What made the matches bad, and how often did you guys wrestle?
We wrestled twice, maybe 3 times. Well, we just didn't have any chemistry, and I couldn't. I mean, it's a great story. We're in Winnipeg, Canada. And I wrestled the Warrior. We come back, and Pat Patterson said, "God, I have to tell you that's the worst championship match I've ever seen." I said, "Pat, you don't have to tell me. I was in it." Because he sent me over a 3-page letter to memorize. And I don't do that. I had to with Randy because it was basically pushed on me. But Randy and DDP and a few other guys, like to write it all down, which is fine. But you have to hope that the crowd is going to feel about the match the way that you've written it down. Because if you have this memorized skit, which is what it is, it becomes a skit when you memorize it, and then you go out and you execute, and the fans aren't buying what you're doing, then what do? If you don't have the experience to start it back up, what do? You lose. And the match stinks. So, with me and the Ultimate Warrior, the match stunk. I don't blame him, I don't blame myself, it just didn't work.
Well, Warrior was really a phenomenon, wasn't he? He really couldn't work. And maybe that's why he didn't last long. But for a short term, he was super over, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't there then, but yes, he was. No doubt about it. They still talk about that match between him and Hulk in Toronto. I didn't see it, but I heard it was phenomenal.
It was. But that was like the blind squirrel finding the acorn, because I never thought that match would be as good as it was.
Yeah, and talking about Jim or Warrior, there's another guy I don't think had the opportunity to learn his skills before he was thrown into the fire. So that happens to a lot of guys that have a real good physique, and the promoter will see him and say, wow, this guy's going to be the greatest, you know what I mean? So I've seen that come and go already now in AEW a couple times. As in WWE, some guys will come in that look really good, and then in 2 weeks they're gone with no explanation. So it requires more than just looks, and requires a tough mental attitude, or requires more than just a physique. It requires a mental attitude, a lot of heart, and a lot of determination to be the best at your craft, to be successful in wrestling today.
Now we're going to talk about...
It's still very competitive.